eat and drink whilst I'm talking. So please stay strong. The first thing I want to do is to thank all my kids and their families for this. It is what it is. Now, I want you to see that Ruth and I weren't always ancient. We were young. We were very, very young. In fact, we're the product of a generation which is, in fact, far more advanced than any of you have experienced. We're from the flower generation. I want to just go back a little bit to explain that to you all. I'm going to talk about the war, World War II. Our parents, they survived that. After they survived that, they rebuilt their lives, they rebuilt the country. And then the kids, they've been through all this hard time of rationing, of building, and they said, we don't want any of this, we want freedom. And they turned the world upside down. So you've got the 60s. The 60s, you had the Beatles, you had the Rolling Stones, you had the Beach Boys, you had Elvis, you had all of those. And in fashion, you had Mary Quant. The world was turned upside down by us all. And then, of course, on the business side of things, because that's my area, I suppose, we have all the people wanting to asset strip. All the things that our parents had built up, they decided, well, let's take it all apart, sell it for far more than it cost, and make a fortune. And so that was the 60s. And then came the 70s. And I mentioned the 70s because we got married in 1976. Between 1973 and 1975, we went through terrible financial times. And I think a commentator said, well, it's a bit like being on the beach. You see all the people in the sea, the tide goes out, and you get to see who's got their swimming costume on. All the people who asset strip, they all went bust. Which is a bit of a shame because some of them were role models to us. So that was our background. The strange thing is, though, that I was in Manchester and Ruth was in London. So, of course, we had to have the Dick Whittington movement from Manchester to London to the streets of gold. How that happened was that I got an offer from the merchant banking arm of Barclays, who were looking for really bright merchant bankers. Well, I've been in merchant banking in Manchester for a couple of years, and it was in the recession. And I knew absolutely nothing about merchant banking. I had a few buzzwords, I could answer a telephone, I could eat a cordon bleu meal at lunchtime. And that was about it. But Barclays thought they were buying and getting somebody superb. Unfortunately, that was all flower and talk. But I came to London because of that. Because it's Barclays, they put me up in the Swansea Hotel in Kensington. And I was there for 6 months with Barclays pay. So I was having a Playboy time. Oops. I've gone down already. Now, a couple of months after I got to London, I went to some of these Jewish evening soirees, and that's where I first saw Ruth. This particular one, I saw, there was this young lady in a white dress. She seemed to be running from group to group to group. And she was talking and socializing, and everybody seemed happy to talk to her. I thought, she seems a nice girl. And so I said to myself, well, one day I'm going to ask that girl out. Now, 2-3 months forward, and I went to another of these Jewish sorts of things, and I saw Ruth, I spotted her. So I said, well, I'm going to ask her out. So I did. And
biggest mistake.
yeah, well, it was a downside. And we got talking. I took her to her car, I cleaned the ice off the windscreen, it was winter, and I asked her out as I said. So we went out for a couple of months, and after a couple of months, Ruth thought she would reel me in. So she said to me, I'm not happy with going out once a month, once a week, once a week it was, that's right. I want to go out more than once a week, otherwise, what's the point? So I said, well, So I gave in. I mean, I was coming from Kensington to Edgware, so it was a bit inconvenient. But at the same time, I was taking out another girl from Edgware, so it was just a case of revolving doors. So I then started taking Ruth out a couple of times a week. Now, about a month, 2-3 months after that, I decided that Ruth was the girl I was going to marry. So I phoned my parents and I said, I want you to come to London, I want to meet this girl who I'm going to marry. So they came to London and I was going to see Ruth that weekend, and I think we went to a lovely restaurant in Richmond. I said to Ruth, I said, look, my parents are coming, let's sort of reorganise and I'll see you on Sunday instead. I'll go and see my parents on a Saturday. I said, oh, by the way, you could come if you wanted to. So, of course, I knew what Ruth would do. And she said, yeah, I want to come. So, my parents met Ruth, and she didn't know what was really going on. They said she's fine. It didn't really matter to be frank with you, because I was still the mother. So 2-3 months after that, I actually put the question to her. And she said yes, and this is what happened. This is what happened. Well, I remember the wedding not so well. I remember particularly standing on the bimmer after the ceremony, signing the book, and Ruth was standing behind me, and it was absolutely wonderful and beautiful. In those days, weddings were sort of package deals. The photos were thrown in, the card was thrown in, the reception was thrown in. The only thing that wasn't thrown in was the steward. And I negotiated with Ruth to go 50-50 with them on that. Well, it's got to do a deal. So that's what happened. We got married, and it was a wonderful thing for us. Now, in a way, it's strange because we weren't similar people. We were totally different people. Ruth was a product of the JFS social system. She didn't do academics, she did social. She had to decide whether she was going to go to work or be a teacher. So she decided to go to work. Her first job was working for a religious education body, which was just another advanced form of social. There wasn't really that much work in it. After that, I think we've got some crying somewhere, but after that, she worked for some solicitors. And when I met her, she was working for DJ Freeman, which is a very fast firm of property solicitors in the West End. We'll shut them out. So, on the other hand, I was this chap in a dream career, which I didn't know anything about or what to do. And I had a playboy background in a way. I had lots of debts. And my role model, who I tried to imitate, he'd just gone bust, like all the other asset strippers. So we were really totally different sorts of people. The peculiar thing was that we had no money, unlike what we hoped to have. So we had no money whatsoever. So that's why I learned DIY, because I had to, I didn't have a choice. Hello. All right. So the first thing I did in the first 6 months of our marriage was to take all the decorations down of the house. I stripped all the wallpaper. The house was absolutely bare. Barclays picked that time to suggest, might I like to go and work in Birmingham? I sort of said, it's not quite the right time. And then the next suggestion was, how about Hong Kong? So I said, no, it's not the right time. I mean, a few years later, I got an offer to go to work in Hawaii. A client wanted me to go to sort of his business out in Hawaii, but then it was Barclays' turn to say no. So that's how our first year went. How we split our lives, Ruth was the king and queen of the house. My job was to bring the money in to pay for the food and to pay for the kids' education. And that sort of went on for about 13 years. And that was my time at Barclays. But in that time at Barclays, things changed an awful lot. You could see me negotiating with the Bob Maxwells, the Rupert Murdochs of this world, the GCs, the Plessies, the Rakels. If there was a guy in the city to go to, people came to me to make things happen. Now, I don't promise I made good things happen. Sometimes they were bad, but I made things happen. But at the end of the 13 years, Ruth and I did the most stupid thing. We decided to set up our own business, a corporate finance business, which was not necessarily competing directly with merchant banks or the investment banks. It was sometimes sitting alongside them, so they made the dealing profits, and I did the hardcore financial advice. In those times, success was measured by the number of listed companies you had in a publication by Crawford's. If you had 50 or 60, you were a mega guy. In the first year, by the end of the first year, I ended up with more listed company clients than most of the small merchant banks. So we're extremely lucky. Now, everything didn't go to plan though. In those days, I used to work a lot in the States and go across the Atlantic to Concord numbers of times. But there was this moment in 6 months, I bought a wine machine, a wine word processor for Ruth. I sent her on training courses. This is all for her birthday. And she was supposed to be very, very accomplished. But there was a 6 month point. I was going to Boston. I was going to do a presentation. And I also had to bulk about 10 presentations for all the people. The night before I went, of course, I was making alterations to the document. And what did Ruth do? She pressed a button and she deleted the whole document. Now, I don't know what to do now, but then I didn't know what to do. That's why I employed Ruth. The document was spread through the whole machine, different files all over the place. So we had to work through the night. And we had to do this by 8 o'clock in the morning because Ruth had to then take the kids to school. So we actually achieved that. Ruth was exhausted and she took the kids to school. And I went off the airport, got into the first class cabin and went to sleep on my way across the Atlantic. So you can all guess that Ruth didn't last long at the shop. She lasted about 12 months with that. And she then got, because she didn't have much to do for just 3 years, she got a part-time job at Canfield Hospital afterwards. Now, I carried on for about 25 years. was a little bit like a series of escapades. Movie films of people being attacked and surviving. You could often see me, hello. I need to hurry up. I tell everybody to keep on eating. So you can often see me charging up windmills, like Don Quixote. You know that one? Yes, Don Quixote. Other times you'd see fireworks in the sky. We had lots and lots of successes. Now sometimes you find me walking on water. Literally and metaphorically having to walk on water. And it was bad for me, difficult, because I couldn't swim. And the worst thing was, there was always sharks circling around. So I wouldn't drown, I'd have been eaten anyway. Now, other times, I had to be an assassin and do everything an assassin did. Now, if you're in the assassin business, you've got to know that sometimes you're going to become the target. So I also became the target. Examples. I was in Los Angeles negotiating for 3 weeks with the biggest companies there. We were creating an electric car, the first mass-produced electric car. This was before Elon Musk thought about the idea. And after the 3 weeks, somehow I ended up controlling all the assets. And not everybody was happy with that. So I was threatened with a contract being taken out of my life. I couldn't go back to Los Angeles for 10 years after that. In London, I told the chief executive that I just sold this company under him to his main competitor. A moment later, 6'4" chap, he had his hands around my throat to try to kill me. In New York City, I'm nearly finished, on Long Island, we had a NASDAQ target, and I went to see it, and the CEO realized he'd said some things he shouldn't have said, that I realized that we shouldn't be buying the company anymore. So he delivered me up to a deserted station in Long Island, and waiting for me was an assassin, not with a gun, with a knife. The assassin chased me around the station for 30 minutes. And I ran, and I ran, and I ran. The train came in. I went to the front of the train because the main entrance was at the back end of the train. I jumped on the train, the front end, and he was the back end. I could see him jumping on the train. So what I did, I saw a berth with 4 seats with some people there. I got in, put my case under the seat, took my raincoat, my jacket, my tie off, rolled my sleeves up, and I sat there. The trouble is that it's 75 minutes between Long Island and Grand Central Station. And I had to survive that length of time. But I was very, very lucky I did. Now, Ruth didn't participate in any of these nasty situations, except for one. There was one where I rode in on my Charger to rescue a listed company, and one of the former directors decided to have a go because he felt he'd been badly dealt with. And he had a pal who was the financial writer for the Daily Mail. And the nature of the transaction was I was going to get millions of shares. I did that by putting more in Ruth's name, because that way I could get away with capital gains tax rather than earned income. So the Daily Mail had a full feature page about Ruth and her tax evasion. Now, Ruth was very, very happy about it. She thought it was grand. I got away with that one. I don't quite know how. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to get to the highlight of our marriage. Now, this is our main achievement. our children. The first one to come along was Michael. Yeah. Ruth was on the operating table. Michael was put in my arms. He had like a bishop's hat on his head. They'd used forceps. And I always remember that. Now the other problem with Michael was that they left the instructions in Ruth's tummy. And he was our first child. We didn't know what to do. He was an experiment. So we got lots of things wrong. The first thing we got wrong was that I didn't train him to support match magic. Instead, he got used to the long ball game at his school, and he now supports and has supported all his life Tranmere Rovers. So I've paid for that mistake. The other thing I got wrong is that he always still today criticises me that I sent him to the wrong school. And this was despite his headmaster saying he had to go to that school, despite the fact that all the alternatives, when Michael went to see them, he said no to them. So he still says that to this day. But there was one thing I got right. He didn't want to leave home. There was a time with the Israel tour, and he didn't want to go on it. So what happened, he went up Northwood Hill, and after the plane had taken off, he then came back home. That's how crazy it was. I remember on his A-levels, you remember this, of course, you know what I'm going to mention, he missed one of his A-levels by a half mark or 1 mark. So we had to go up to Manchester to try and get him on the course that he wanted. So we went up there, we spoke to the tutor and professor for about an hour. Michael didn't say a word. All the tutor wanted to do was to learn about investment. So I talked for an hour. He got his offer straight away, so I got something right. Then, after Michael, along came David, wherever he is. Oh, he's there. Now, David had a bad time. He swallowed poo when he was being born. And he gave us 2 or 3 days of worry. Now, I'd learned from him what to do with David. So it was intensive education. Every day I was on his back. I even homeschooled him when he was about 10 or 11 for his exams. I took him to his first exam and he came out totally white-faced, shaking. So I said to Ruth, I'm not doing this again, that's it. We'll give up. But Ruth said, no, he's got to go through and do it. And she was right. The next one, he was absolutely fine. The good thing with David is I got on very, very well with his teachers. It was wonderful. He had more homework than any other pupil in our school. And he did fantastically. He had a dream that Michael's mentioned. Michael didn't have a dream. His grandfather pushed him in the right direction instead. I didn't want to direct him. But David had a dream, and he needed an extra A-level. He didn't want to do it. I think it was design, technology or something. So I agreed to make all the products that he had to make on his course. And David sat the exams. I don't think my marks were fantastic, but David still got his A-levels. Now, after David, 5 years later, we thought, well, we've got to make our family complete. So we've got to have a girl. And we thought, and that would be our third child. Andrew.
Well remembered.
Yeah, Andrew came, but we were prepared because it's the first time before the birth we actually said to the hospital, tell us the gender, and we were told that, so we knew that.
What did they say?
They said it was going to be a boy.
Okay.
But it didn't matter because Michael subsequently affirmed dual gender status, that he'd be a daughter as well as a son, so it didn't really matter. Now, when Andrew came along, what I particularly remember is the day after I went to see him at the hospital, I was in a meeting, we were doing a flotation at the stock exchange, a company called Arpico. I said to everybody, look, I've got to go and see my newborn son. I'm going to leave you eating sandwiches, I'll be back. So off I went to the hospital, they popped Andrew on my knee, and he pooed all over me. So I had to go back to my meeting with this suit full of, I don't know what. So I do remember that. Now, we had a different approach with Andrew. I had a free approach. I've got to stop. No, I'll tell you, I'm going to get to the grandkids soon. We had a free approach revival. With David it was intensive. Now with Andrew I didn't quite work out what to do. So I think I worked it out at the primary school. I went to see the teachers and I complained about his punctuation because I had high standards. His punctuation was appalling. So instead of agreeing with me, his teacher said, it's irrelevant. It's all about creativity. And that's what he's good at. So after that, I didn't say a dicky bird to the school. All I could do was to go to almost every rugby match, every cricket match. And I needed to do that because he kept getting injured. I had to take him to hospital. Now, this is where we're now getting to the grandkids, and you don't want me to stop. This goes back 10 years, 11 months. And that's older than you, Ada. Are you wondering why? Well, the reason why is that 10 years, 11 months ago, I was told I had an illness. And every day I went to bed and I didn't think I was going to get up in the morning. And that went on for 4 months. And after the 4 months, I was told they'd made a mistake and everything was fine. So it was like a big miracle. But that wasn't the biggest miracle, because 2 months later, along came Ada. So Ada is my miracle grandchild. My first grandchild and my miracle grandchild. Ada was named after Ruth's mum. So you're very precious to your grandmother as well. Well, I'm sure you're precious to everybody, but there's a special link. Now, after Ada came Esther. Where are you, Esther? There you are. Now, Esther is a young lady. She looks at you with her eyes, she smiles at you, she knows she has you around her little finger. Now, after Esther came Lewis. Now, Lewis, he's like Spider-Man. He climbs walls. You see him in his bedroom, he will climb to the ceiling and climb back again. He tells me he's going to climb Everest. I believe him. Then after Lewis, we have Elsie. She's somewhere around. Now, Elsie came,
not there anymore.
it's the only one of my grandchild came totally within COVID. And it was strange, so she's a COVID miracle. Now, after Elsie, we have Ronnie. Now, Ronnie, he talks non-stop. He doesn't listen to music, not to stories, he just wants to chatter and chatter to me. And he can do no wrong because he's named after my dad. After Ronnie came Nathan. Now, Nathan's learned everything from his brothers, Lewis and Ronnie. So Nathan is going to stretch me beyond a point I've ever been, and I realise that. Now, last comes Alfie. Now, Alfie, he's a little bit, he's like Esther. He looks at you with his big eyes and that lovely smile, and he has you around his little finger, and he knows it. He knows it. So, I've been very, very lucky with our kids, our grandkids, as has Ruth. And now we're here today. And you're all the people who've sort of seen us through life. And we both thank you for that. Thank you and thank you for coming, and you can now eat again.